Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. Great to see you all again for session 2 of our 3-part webinar series, proudly brought to you by EquityRT, your go-to global investment research platform, now making waves across Africa. In our first session, we covered the basics of EquityRT, platform navigation, data coverage, and some of the core tools in the platform. Today, we're shifting gears into something more practical and more powerful, EquityRT Connect, which is the Excel add-in. Now, just a quick reminder, if you attend all 3 sessions from start to finish, you receive an official EquityRT certificate of participation, perfect to add to your CV or even your LinkedIn profile, a nice little flex for your research toolkit. So we have the next hour to jump into this. So let's get cracking. I mentioned EquityRT Excel add-in. So I'm going to actually start off very simple from ground zero and assume nobody knows what an Excel add-in is and just give you the explanation through, and then we'll build up from that. So think of it in this way. You are in Excel, you want specific market data or company data. Instead of logging into the platform and doing a copy and paste or an Excel export and a paste into and an export into Excel and then working with the data, you could just type a function in Excel, and Excel will send a message to our servers, and our servers will send the data straight into Excel, into your spreadsheet. Seamless, flexible, and efficient. A lot quicker way of getting data into Excel. And even better, once you have set up your template for, just say, for example, P ratios, a time series of price to book values, or maybe it's 20 companies, financial year end revenue numbers for the last 10 years, you can just reuse these templates again and again just by changing the ticker codes and using these templates for other work that you might do. It's quite easy. And to make this possible, we've developed a set of EquityRT functions that talks to our servers. Sort of like your normal Excel sum formula, VLOOKUPs, your average formulas. These formulas look very similar to that. It's just that the syntax that we use speaks the same language as our servers, and our servers know exactly what data to send to which cell. So today we're gonna walk through a couple of items. Just on a high level, I'm gonna show you. We'll start off with just basically understanding the syntax. So we'll spend the first few minutes of understanding what an EquityRT syntax looks like, or what the formula looks like. We'll then do a time series for one stock. We'll then we'll add on more stocks to the time series. We'll then add on more value types of functions to the time series. We look at different date frequencies. We look at looking at financial numbers like revenues. How do we get that in for different year ends? We'll also look at how do you build up stock lists. So how do you build up a list of South African stocks or list of mining stocks? How do I actually get my groups of tickers that I can use in my Excel formulas? And then we'll also dive into the Excel widgets that are available on EquityRT Connect on the Excel add-in that you could also use to actually pull data in. And then we'll close out with this, looking at, if you build a template, how do you actually manipulate or adjust a template to suit your specific needs. So before I continue, if you have any questions, there's a Q&A box on the platform. Please log any of your questions in there, and then we'll actually answer them in the session, or alternatively, it will be emailed to your mailbox. I'm now going to move away from I'm going to actually bring my Excel screen onto the, so you can actually see it. So you should be seeing my Excel screen now. Just give me a thumbs up if you can see my Excel screen. Great stuff. Okay, so my Excel screen is visible, and we can actually get started. So I'm going to try and blow this up a little bit on my end so you can see what's happening. So as I mentioned, I mean, the first part would be, we're going to get stuck into understanding how an EquityRT Excel function looks like and how those functions are driven. And we'll start off with something very basic, and we'll continue building onto this spreadsheet as we go along. And I'll take you through the actual full Connect add-in. So on the top, when you launch Excel, on the top toolbar, you'll notice there's an EquityRT Connect Excel add-in that sits on your Excel toolbar. If you were to click it, you'll see it has a whole lot of widgets that sits within there, and these widgets help you to pull data quite easily. So these widgets make data extraction quite easily. But before we jump into the widgets, we're going to start off with the basic understanding of the syntax. So, and I'm going to stick this, let's select a cell here. So in the cell where my cursor is at the moment, I'm actually going to stick in, and I'm just going to try and use colors. So in that yellow cell, I'm going to start sticking in some formula, and I'm actually going to build a little Excel model to pull data into Excel. So Excel functions are driven, and we're going to make it quite simple. So let's assume we want to pull in the close price. So the objective would be close price data for, let's say, MTN, and we want to pull this for the last, let's pull this for the month of April. So that's our objective. In order for our EquityRT functions to work, we require a ticker, we require a date, we require a currency, and I'll explain to you why currency is so important. And then we also require to utilize we need to know which field that we are going to use. In this case, we're going to use close price. So we're going to actually do close price. That will be our field that we're going to bring in. So as I mentioned, we are using MTN. So the ticker that we'd be using MTN ZA. So as you know, with EquityRT tickers, our tickers have the alpha code of the index or the exchange. And then we have a colon with a country prefix or country suffix will be like ZA or BW for Botswana or GB for Great Britain, London Stock Exchange. It will be KE for Kenya, etc. The currency that we want to look at our data in, I'm just going to stick this in, it's going to be ZAR. And as I mentioned, we are looking for data for April. So I'm going to manually, for the first example, I'm going to manually enter in a few dates for April. I'm just going to enter in a few date ranges there. So far, I haven't done anything phenomenal. I've just basically created a simple table that I want to view my data in. I'm going to start off in that yellow block, and I need to actually now get a function in there that's going to tell our servers to bring in the close price for MTN for that particular date. The easiest way to do this would be, for someone that does not know the functions, would be to go to EquityRT Connect, go to function list, and in the function list, all of EquityRT functions sit in this list, and there's tons of them. We are creating functions on a monthly basis. There's requests for new functions in Excel to be created by the various users across the globe, and we're continuously creating functions within the platform. The terminology of the functions follows very similar to what's in the platform. So in this case, I'm looking at close price, and I'm going to go into the search bar, and I'm going to search for close. When I search for close, it delivers to me all of the close functions available within the platform. So you'll see there's a whole lot of close functions available. For this case, I'm looking at daily data because I want daily data. I'm looking at data, I'm looking at daily data, I'm looking at the close prices available on the platform. So you'll notice we have 3 close prices, and I may have mentioned this in the previous webinar. We have the close adjusted ex-div price, which is the go-to price for South African analysts, mainly because it takes into account adjustments for corporate actions, and it excludes dividends. And I've got the close price that's unadjusted, that includes dividends, and then I've got the close raw, will be the raw close price on the exchange on that particular date. So since it's a historic analysis and time series, I want to include some of the adjustments that have been made for corporate actions. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to select the function that I require. That's the description of the function, and I'm going to click on OK. So all that I've done at this point in time is I'm sticking the function into that cell, and you'll see up here a function has been sorted into the cell. If I click on the function block, sorry, let me just again, if I click on the function block, it actually breaks down what the logic of that function. So I want to spend some time and just explain to you, because I mean, this is the foundation of the Excel add-in, and there's a foundation of the Excel function. Once you understand this logic, any function that you require, that you need to add or need to use, can be built in this manner. So in this case, when I open up the function by clicking on the little FX button that you'll find on Excel next to the function block, I can see in order for this function to work, it needs a security. In this case, it needs MTN. So I'm going to now link that cell to MTN, and I'm going to lock that cell using the dollar signs. So let me try again, using the dollar sign. So when I drag this formula down, it does not move. So I've got $E, dollar sign, that cell E3.4, cell E3, which is MTN, as you can see there. I'm going to then lock, I'm then going to reference the date, and I'll click on that and I'll reference the date, because I'm going to drag that down as well. Just for good practice, I'm just going to lock the column. So when I drag, if I have to drag it across, it does not move the column. So I've got the date in. My fields automatically inputted because I've already selected this particular field. For good practice, I'm going to link the currency, because, and I'll show you why I've linked the currency. So I'm going to link the currency to ZAR, and I'm going to lock that cell. And at that point, you already see that it's already giving me a value. It's already returning a value. So if I click on, after linking the security, the date, the field, and the currency, I can now click on that and I actually have a value in the cell. If I were to drag this down, it starts to collect data from the servers and bring that data back into Excel from the servers. So that's a very basic function that we did. We brought in the close price as a time series for a specific range of dates, and we bought it for MTN, which is basic. If I look at that function again, just to remind you, just to go back, what we did, we built up a template view of our spreadsheet, what we want it to look like. We went into the block where we want to add the function. We went to the function list. We searched for the function that we need using the search bar, or we could also have used the category search. So for example, if you're not finding your function on the search bar, you can actually search by category. So it gives you the various categories here, daily data. So it means selected again, daily data, and then I could have also selected the relevant field from here. So if I'm not finding it on the search bar, I could go to category search and find that via browsing through the various categories of data that we have. And as you can see, I mean, you've got ratio, financial, mathematical, date functions, etc. So you could also use this option to find your function. And then all that we did is we basically used Excel common sense and linked up the necessary cells and dragged this function down. What's happening at the moment in this function, just blow this up a little bit more. What's happening at the moment in this function is Excel is basically telling our servers, go and fetch data for that stock, for that date with that currency, and in the function we've got the value type, in this case close adjusted xdiv, that we are collecting. What will happen is, if I were to now run this for, let's assume I'm running this for now Vodacom. If I went and changed my ticker to Vodacom, it will then go and fetch. It will then apply the logic. It will then go fetch for Vodacom. If I then decide to actually fetch that for Netbank, I'm driving this through the ticker code. It will then fetch that for Netbank. If I want this for British American Tobacco in Great Britain or London Stock Exchange, it will then fetch the price for Great Britain. But just remember, it's bringing the value back in ZAR because I've referenced it to ZAR. If I wanted to see value of the value of the British American Tobacco in London Stock Exchange, if I wanted to see that in pounds, I could just change that to GBP, and I could then see that data in pounds. Likewise, if this was MTN, and I wanted to see that in US dollar, I could then see the MTN prices in US dollar, which allows the flexibility in terms of, and that's the reason why I mentioned upfront that out of good practice, it would be good to look at linking up a currency to your model so that it allows you for the currencies to change your currencies when you're looking at a model. We have a question around other asset classes. Yes, so basically any ticker on the platform that you have would be able to be your daily data, whether it's a commodity, whether it's a fixed income line item, or whether it's a macroeconomic data set or an index. Like if I went to this and I said I want the SPX with the S&P 500 in the USN, sorry, it's USY. I could then bring in the, this is the S&P 500 index, and then I could bring in. So pretty much I could bring in other data sets in here, provided I'm using the right field. Just remember, your field becomes quite important. If that field is specific to a stock, then you obviously get stock. So close adjusted XDiv is a stock field. But if I were to choose a different field, I could then use this a different field for a commodity or for a currency. So for example, let's assume I wanted I wanted to pull the closing price for currencies. For currencies, I wouldn't use the XDiv price. Let's adjust this. So let's assume I change the narrative and I say this time I want USD ZAR FX. So I want to bring in the USD ZAR FX code. In currency, I wouldn't need to link a currency because it's a currency. So in this case, I'll go to my function list and I'll just bring in the standard close, which is default close. So my default close price is the close daily, and the close daily will function with your commodities and your currency. So I'm just going to choose the standard close, which is your close daily, and I'm going to stick that function in, and I'm going to do the same. It's exactly the same process. Link my security, which is in this case it's the currency that I'm linking this time, and I'm going to link the date, and then now I've got currencies that are in my data set. Just remember, you're going to be using, when you're using Excel, because it's driven by the tickers. Quite often, you're going to find yourself between platform and Excel, because sometimes you might not know of a specific ticker. So, for example, I wanted to bring in a commodity, and I couldn't, for the love of God, I couldn't figure out what that commodity was. I could go into the platform and look up quickly look up a commodity. Just remember, from a lookup perspective, you can look up on Excel, but I find it much easier to look up on the platform, because then I can very quickly see what I'm looking at. So, for example, LSUSC is lithium. LSUSC is lithium. Let's go gold since it's more common. XAU USD USC. So I could pick up any of these currencies, copper AG07 USC. So I could go here and AG07 USC, and I could then bring those prices into the platform. So this will be your base starting point. Now let's assume I want to, and again, this is the challenge at most universities. I'm not doing this for one stock. I'm doing this for few stocks. So if I had to do the same exercise for few stocks, and let's get back to let's change the narrative slightly. So this time I want to do, let's keep it still same as close, just for the case of the exercise, and let's keep that as ZAR. But this time I'm not going to link up the ticker there. I want to actually create a sheet that has, for example, MTN here. It has Vodacom here. Maybe I've got Blue Telecoms here. And I want to bring in a price for this. So the logic will be exactly the same. I'm going to bring in close Justice X pricing here. This time what I'm going to do is, if you'll see, I'm going to adjust my function to make sure I'm linking up the correct cell. So my security now sits in the cell. I'm just going to lock out the row, so when I drag the function, it doesn't mess me up. So now I've got the security linked up. I've got my date linked up. I'm just going to lock the column there, so when I drag it, it doesn't mess things up. And I'm going to link the currency to ZAR there, and I'm clicking OK. So now what I can do is, if I drag this formula across there, so now I can very quickly see. I now can have. Let's make sure I'm linking. See, I forgot to link I did not lock the currency, and that's why it's messing things up. Let me go back there and lock the currency. So when I drag it, it doesn't mess things up. So now I've locked the currency. And let's do that again. And do that again. And now all of a sudden, now I've got multiple stocks, and I've got multiple data for multiple stocks. And again, I mean, this list can be extended. You can actually extend this list along the right-hand side in this format, or if you decide to build your Excel spreadsheet in a different format, which we'll do this just now, you could actually build that in a different format. So now I've got 3 stocks. So when it comes to things like specific ratios that you are pulling or anything else, and I'll do an example of a ratio just now to show you the different functions. Depending on the function that you put in, this logic can be applied to any data set that you have on the platform. I've got a question coming in. If there are any limitations or loss of functionality when using the Excel add-in in Mac compared to Windows? Yes, I think Excel works. Microsoft and Windows don't work well together, and that's the reality of the two. This works on Office or Microsoft Windows specifically. I know that there is a Microsoft add-in or Microsoft app for Mac, and we know that there has been issues reported using the Microsoft app on Mac. So because of the way the backend is structured, so I would advise against using it on Mac. Windows operating system, Microsoft Office is definitely preferable to have a seamless experience. So coming back to the model, so like I said, I mean, this is a very straightforward model. I'm going to quickly dive now. So now what we've done is I've shown you how to pull one stock. I've shown you how to pull multiple stocks. The actual field, the function field, is based on what you need. So using the function block, as I showed you, will drive the function. So before I move on to date, so let's assume this was not supposed to be close price, but instead this exercise was for P ratio, as an example. This exercise was for P ratio. What I could then do is, instead of searching the function for close, I could go into my function list, and this time I could search the function for PE. And again, I mean, it'll give me the various functions. It gives me an index P function, which I'm not interested in. If I look at ratios in the system, valuation ratios, I've got some ratios where I search P/E, so it gave me everything that comes up. So I actually want that ratio, the P ratio. And I'll just stick that P ratio into my model again, exactly as I had done before. Click on that function button and then just start linking the relevant cells. So they link that, lock the row, link. In this case, I want it for a specific date. I'm not looking at a specific quarter. I want it for a specific day because I got a daily time series. I'll link that to my date again, locking the column. I'll link, it's already giving me the PE. If I scroll further down, I have the option of currency, which I can always, as good practice, link. The currency, link and lock, I should say. Let's do it again. Link and lock, because I want to lock the currency in, and then again, it's a case of dragging and building up my table. Again, it's the field is driven by the function that you choose. The logic remains the same across any data set that you look at. Are we comfortable? Give me a thumbs up if we're comfortable so far. Is the pace okay, or should I slow things down a bit or speed things up? Let's say just pop me a note on the Q&A and I can gladly oblige. So, that's a case of actually building up. So again, I mean, in terms of structuring this, if you want to structure it differently, for example, you've decided, okay, you're working on a few stocks, maybe 10 stocks or 20 stocks, you could then decide, okay, if your exercise requires P ratio for multiple dates, and you're looking at price to book value, and you're looking at maybe EBITDA, maybe looking at market caps, etc. So you're looking at maybe 5 or 6 metrics for multiple stocks. You could then create your stock list, and then you could create your date list. My suggestion would be, in terms of building massive spreadsheets, just remember, EquityRT does not stop the amount of data that you can pull on Excel. So if you want to try and pull, if you want to try being the operative word, if you want to try and pull to say 3,000 lines of data, you'd probably end up pulling it, but it's going to eat up your PC's power. Chances are Excel will bomb out before we decide to stop giving you the data. So in that sense, when you're building these models, try and build it smartly, because most PCs cannot handle downloading phenomenal volumes of data. So just remember, if I build a spreadsheet that has, if I'm pulling down, let's say, 1,000 lines of data across 20 columns or 30 columns, it's going to take longer than what I've done today. So you'd have to then give it a chance to update. There is no update button on the platform on Excel for EquityRT. As soon as you open up this spreadsheet, it automatically will bring in the data based on the logic that you've written in. So there's no refresh button as such. So bear that in mind. If you are trying to pull large volumes of data, you're gonna basically open up your spreadsheet and just let your PC do the download. If you try and start browsing the internet and you start doing a lot of other stuff, you eat up your PC's when you eat up your PC's ability, your PC's performance gets eaten up, and eventually Excel starts to bomb out because your PC cannot handle doing so many tasks at once. From a date perspective, so that's the structure that you have. And I mean, I did P ratio for all of these, but I mean, if I wanted to bring in, for example, PE in that cell and close price in that cell, for example, for MTN, so I've got MTN there, and I want to bring in close price here. All I got to do now is I'll basically bring in the close function for MTN there and drag it down, so I don't have PE close, PE close, PE close, and I can drag that formula. So I assume from an Excel perspective, you guys are efficient enough to manipulate the Excel as and when as you please. So you could bring in a lot of different functions just for one stock, or you could do multi-stock, like I've done here. Now every time you delete a cell, it will automatically refresh the data set. I'm going to quickly look at. So now we've got an exercise. We've got 3 stocks, telecoms industry, and I've got some dates running around here. Let's assume I want to automate the date range. So managing dates, if you Excel efficient, you can actually manage your dates in Excel. But however, if you want to automate your date selection, we have various date functions as well in the platform. So for example, this date range I've just created manually, but I've got functions within the platform that can handle dates. So for example, instead of me bringing in a date in manually, like I've done, I could go into my function and I'll just show you the date functions, and I'll stick a couple of functions in here and I'll show you what it does. So if I go to category and I'm going to select data, I'm going to select date. So if I look at date functions here, it actually gives me a whole lot of date functions that I can use. So for example, I could use, instead of manually putting in the date, I could say, give me the last date in the database. So last date in the database is usually the last day of the last record that I have in the system. It's the last time this record was updated. And I could say, give me the last day in the database. And if I click on that function in there, it'll automatically give me a last database date. So I'm just going to convert that into a short date so you can see what it looks like. So that automatically tells me that the last date in the database was as at close of business yesterday, which is the last close yesterday. Now, if I want to automate this date function, I could then say, okay, can I get a date? So can I get the previous day and the previous day and the previous day? So we have a function for previous date. So I'm going to go back in there. We have a previous date function as well. So now I'm building a date logic on the platform. So I'm going to go to date again. And you'd see now I could say I want to bring in a previous day. So like I have, last date, DB, last period date. So I could actually bring in a previous day. So there's last month, etc. Next day, next period, previous day. So I could then bring in the previous day function in that cell. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to tell it. I'm going to tell the function there, can I bring a date in referencing the 6th of May? Can I bring in 1 day prior to that? So 1 day prior to 6th of May, which is which will be the 5th of May. Let's change that function to short date. I would then drag that down and just say previous day, previous day, previous day, previous day, previous day. And all of a sudden, I've got previous day functions. So as you see here, what it does as well with the previous day function, it excludes my non-trading days. So if I use the dates out of EquityRT, it uses the date logic in terms of time of year, in terms of public holidays of the relevant exchange, etc. It automatically will then adjust to remove your weekends. Now I've got previous day function, but let's assume I wanted this to be weekly. Instead of taking the previous day number of days as 1, I could make that 7. So I could say, okay, give me 7 days prior. So what it'll then do now is, and if I drag that down, it'll actually just give me every week data for every week. If I made that 7 into 30, it'll give me every 30 days as an example. So I could use that date logic to build up a specific data set. So if I look at, so that's one way of looking at dates. So again, we saw we've got multiple data types. We created a function in table in this format. It gives us, we can create tables in different formats as well. So let's take an example now. We'll still keep the example with MTN, Vodacom, and Blue Telecom, but let's assume now we want to change the narrative and change the way this looks. And we want our table to look slightly differently. We want to now, let's take these and we want to bring these on let's transpose these here. And this time, what we want to do is we want to change how this table looks. And we want to bring in, and we've got the exercise now, we want to compare the revenues of these 3 companies over the last, and we're no longer looking at a specific date, we're looking at a specific period, because now we're talking about financial year ends. So we want to look at financial periods, and we're going to look at the financial periods over the last 4 revenue, and we want to look at the periods for the last, and in those cells, we want to bring in the last 4 periods of data that was released. So we have a function, and let's do it for one stock first. Let's do it manually. Let's do it manually first. So EquityRT, like on the platform, and let's jump back into the platform quickly. So like on the platform, the way that financials are reported, you'd see that we have from a date structure perspective, 2024/YE is the syntax of our periods. So I'll follow the same syntax. 2024YE, 2023YE, 2022YE for my year-end values, and so forth as we go along. And let's assume I want to bring in revenue. I'll do the exact same thing again. Function list. This time I'll search revenue, and when I search revenue, I know the function's off, so revenue sits at. So I've got GAAP revenue that sits here. I've got you'll see I've got the various types of revenue, whether it's you want the IFRS revenue from a revenue perspective, and then our universal functions will sit all the way down here under ratios. You'll see under ratios, you'll see that our revenue sits here. So my suggestion would be use the ratio function as much as possible. It's not a ratio, so for revenue lines, it's actually financial numbers. So it's not a ratio. So you could look at look at bringing using one of these values. If you want something specific from a financial line item, you could use any of these IFRS line items that sits up here. So I'll just click on that, and I'll stick a function into Excel. So once I stick that function in here, it again goes to the same story of just attaching. In this time, I'll attach a security. So again, I'll follow the same function, attach the security. This time I'll attach a quarter to it. And then I'll continue filling all of this data in to bring the data. If I'm looking at other functions, I'm going to go back into my function list again. If I wanted to find a function without using the search bar, I could go in here and I could go into, you'll see if I go into financials here, it also gives me the financial functions here. So this is sometimes the most difficult part, is trying to actually figure out your which functions that you're going to use. And then using this category selection might be your easiest way to figure out which functions you want to actually use. So here I've got, I can choose my IFRS income statement, and then you'll see here I have all my my different functions in here. So again, I've got a revenue function in here that I could stick in. So again, you can pick out your different functions. So now I've got a revenue function in here, my IFRS revenue function. And again, it builds up all of your data that you need, leaves you just with the security, and it leaves you with the quarter that you're going to bring in. That's all it leaves you with. It just leaves you the security and the quarter. In this case, I can also link up my currency, and I can actually bring data into my table. And that using that logic, you can then build up your Excel models for your revenues and your cost of sales and your gross profits, etc. So this is the way that you'll actually build up a lot of these data sets that you require. If you look at I want to take you through, and I'm not going to go through each and every function because the logic is pretty much the same. You find a function, put it in there. Within the function itself, you'll see, if I look at this particular function that we're looking at, revenue function, you'll see that it's referencing a security, in this case MTN. It's referencing a quarter, which is 2024, and it's automatically referencing an IFRS template. I'm locking in the currency, and then you'll see that I also have a coefficient that I could then, if I wanted to round this off to millions, I could then round this off to millions by adding the coefficient. So that would be one of the ones that we do. So creating a date range becomes quite easy here. Like I said, I manually enter this date range, but if I wanted to create a date range for, let's take MTN as a solo stock. If I want to create the last 3 years or last few periods for MTN, instead of typing in the date, I could use a function that sits within the function box, which is the last period. So if I go into my categories again, and I go into my date category, we have a function here for the last period. So I could then automatically bring in the last period for the stock. So what was the last time it released financials? So that's the last period was 2025 for MTN. If I change that to, let's say, if I change that to Mr. Price, for example, let's see if they released their last period of data was 2025 as well. If I look at NetBank, I think they're 2025 as well. I'm not sure the 6 months is out. So as you change these tickers, tickers will drive in the relevant last period of data for that particular stock. So you could automatically create your last period, and as I've done with the dates, you could say previous period, previous period, previous period, and automatically will bring in that date range in there. I want to take you through in terms of bringing up your list. So a key part of building these Excel spreadsheets, if I can go back a couple of spaces, a key part of building these spreadsheets actually requires you to find your tickers, because that's kind of the hardest part. Is how do I actually I know how to bring in the formula in, but how do I actually bring in a list of stocks There's a couple of ways. So for example, if you wanted to run this exercise for the entire all share, but you don't know what the all share stocks are, the one way would be of getting the list of stocks, because I mean, that would be your starting point. So you've done all of this, great, but now you need to find your list of stocks. One way would be to go into the platform. You could go into index list for the specific index. You could go and look at let's do top 40, for example. You could go into the stock, and in here you could export this list of constituents that sits here, and that gives you all of the symbols that's within the top 40. I could then take that list of stocks and stick those list of stocks here, drag my formula down, and I've got my table as I require. Another way of actually bringing in list of stocks into my Excel spreadsheet, I could go into my symbol list on Excel. This is another way of doing it. I could go into my symbol list in Excel, and when I go into my symbol list, I can create a list of symbols that I can use in my Excel. So for example, here I've got the whole of the JSE. I could then say, okay, I want the entire JSE. I could do that. Move everything across here and click on OK. What it'll do is then bring in all the stocks on the JSE in here. If I do not want the entire JSE, I'll just delete that. Let's assume my exercise was just on the all share or specific index. I could go in here and I could go at index. And then likewise, I mean, I could then filter out using the various filter sections here. Like for example, top 40. I could say, give me all the top 40. And I could create my list of the top 40 out of here. So now I've got my top 40 list. So once you've got your list, what you do in these cells in terms of functions is up to you, whether it's P ratios, whether it's price to books, and then again, I mean, or it's closing price or market caps or bid values, ask values, whatever it may be. And then obviously managing the date range, managing date range. So I've built this function in this manner. I could have my dates running in that manner, or I could bring in my stocks in columns and bring my dates running down. All depends on what type of sheet. If I'm doing daily data, I suggest bringing the dates down the rows. If I'm looking at maybe last 10 periods, I'd rather bring the stocks down the rows and bring the dates across the columns, depending on how you want your data to look at this. There's a couple of questions coming in. I'll just quickly try and answer them. In terms of share structure, I'm not sure whether we house that on Excel. I think it's available on the platform. I don't think we show that. I'll have to confirm that for you. I'll make a note of that. So again, I mean, I see the question reads, we do academic research. We work with large data sets. Our need will download daily share prices for all constituents, current and delisted, of JSE and all share for the last 5 years. Okay, so exactly as I've covered now, the best way would be to bring in the all share in this manner. So again, I mean, this list that comes in that we're showing, that's the current list of your all share. In terms from a delisted perspective on the platform, if you have, there is a range of delisted stocks that sits on the platform. You'd have to add those codes in to bring those codes into the platform. Okay, so that's perfect. So from a platform perspective, so these are the way of bringing in historic data. I've shown you how to bring in financials. I've shown you the logic of the financial data tables, etc. And we're looking at, and I'll show you how to create stock lists. So your stock list can be created out of here, or alternatively, as I mentioned, of the platform. Another way of creating stock list or list of tickers, which I do quite often, is if I want to run an analysis on specific sectors, I could use the platform, go to the sector overview page, for example, and bring in specific sector stocks. So for example, going into sector overviews like this and bringing in a list of stocks from a specific sector to create my stock list. Alternatively, I could use the sector analytics function that sits on the platform, where I could filter out. So let's assume I want to run a research on all of the bricks mining stocks that are sitting with a P ratio of between 15 and 35. So I could use the sector analytics as a short listing tool to say, okay, I'm only interested in BRICS countries, and I'm only interested in specific sectors, and I just want P/E ratios between the value of 15 and 35, for example. I could use this sector analytics tool to shortlist this list of stocks that I then want to pull historical data in Excel for. So that could be a way of handling this. So this is the way that this is kind of, for me, it's the most flexible way of using the Excel add-in. We do have other abilities within the platform as well, within the Excel capable add-in. So for example, you'll see if you want to bring in an entire financial statement, we have a financial table widget here. And again, these widgets are pretty much self-explanatory. So for example, let's assume I want to bring in ABSA's, I'll just click on ABSA, add it to the buy box. And let's assume I want to bring in the 24. I'm just going to use the control button and select multiple periods here. Let's select 2024, 2023, 2022, and 2021. I'm just using the control bar button again and double selecting income statement, balance sheet. I've got an IFRS selected already there, and I can click on OK. What this does is it brings the entire financial statement, the banking financial statement, into Excel. So here I've got a very quick way of bringing in a financial statement to Excel. I've got the whole financial statement into Excel. I can then run this data for multiple, and because this is a bank, and if I went to change the net bank, I should be able to get the net bank's financial statement as well once I have it. This statement using the widget, have this in Excel. Likewise, this is a financial statement. Likewise, I have a grid. So if I find the manual creation of grids too cumbersome and it's too long to build up, trust me, that's the way I build my grids is the way I've shown you. That's the faster way once you be efficient. However, if you want a little easier way, you could use our gridding tool that helps you to build the grid. So for example, I could say I want my rows to have dates. I want my columns to have symbols, and I want my single dimension to be a one-dimensional table. I click on next. I could say I want this data for ABSA. I'm just going to randomly choose a few stocks, or I could take all the stocks. It would be a massive table. Next, I could say I want this for. I'm just going to keep this very short so that we don't let this hang for too long. And I'll just say I want this data from April to May this year. I'll go next, and you could say I want the close price. As an example, I'm just searching it from the list. Close adjusted XDiv. I add it to my basket. I go next, and I say I want this descending or ascending. I'm just going to leave it at the ascending. And I click on OK, and it'll actually give me, I think I did that weekly, so monthly, so it'll give me data in this. It could be my starting point as well. I could build this in here, and I could build onto top of this if I wanted to. There's a migrate function. There's a comparison analysis function. I see we had a question around correlation matrices. So for example, this allows me to do that type of stuff, building up correlation. So for example, let's assume I want to build up a correlation for the stocks in the top 40. Let's do that rather. Stocks in the top 40, and I want to bring in, I want to compare it against the J203 in terms of performance. And maybe I want to get a beta that's based on, I could look for a beta that's based on a 5-year beta. So I'll take that back to 2020. I could adjust the date daily, and I could also add the correlation to that. So I can use this tool to create that type of matrices. In this case, remember, I'm using J203 as my security, and then I've got a beta and a correlation for the stocks of the J203 that's in the platform, as at the dates that I've selected. So I could build this up in the platform using the comparison analysis. Likewise, I mean, if I want to look at performance, there's a little widget here that helps you build performance tables. And I could look at, if I'm looking at the top 40 as an example, Again, relative to J203, this time I want to look at performance, comparing against the old share. And I could then create a performance table that shows the performance. And we've already got daily, weekly, monthly, 12-month, and year-to-date. And now I've got a performance table relative to J203 that's in the platform. Now, all that the widget is doing is the widget is doing some of the work for you. So if I were to click on a specific cell, and if I click on the function, it tells me the logic that's being used. So in this case, let's look at the performance table. So it's saying that this is the function that we're using is a res. It's a daily rate of change between two dates. That's the function. It's a daily rate of change between two dates. The date 1 is the current date. The date 2 is the date, the previous date, and it's bringing in the close. And the relative security is looking at is an M7, which is J203, and it's building the logic. So you could have built this table using the method I showed you, or you could use the widget, which brings it on much faster. But again, with the widget now that's built there, you could then go and adjust the tickers or adjust the way it looks. You'll also see I'm bringing names in here. The names are also being brought by a function. There's a function that's bringing the name in as well. So as you use these widgets and you use the templates, which I'm going to touch on now, you'd be able to look at other functions, the way it's used, and how you can actually bring that into your Excel models. It makes it quite easy to build. You can bring in, for example, industry name or peer group name. You can bring those in here as well, and it's all found in the function list. So even your categories, you'll find within your categories, and if I go other, and within these categories, you'll see that, I mean, someone spoke about other instrument types earlier on, bond market data, yield curve series. There's a whole lot of functions that are in here. And again, depending on the stock you're looking at, depending on the exchange, you'd find that data. Like, for example, we've got a group name, then we've got there's macro data that you can also pull in here. So if you are stuck in finding a function, you can reach out to support@equityrt.com, and someone from support desk can guide you to the function that you can't find. Also on the platform, if you ask ERA for a specific function, it'll tell you, okay, use this function. It can't write the function for you, but it'll advise you on which is the best function to use. So that's another place you can find it. But again, the team is quite fluent in terms of the functions. So if you were to ask, I'm trying to do this, they'll very quickly come back to you and say, okay, this is the function you should use for this exercise. Alternatively, in most cases, if it's simple stuff like this, we might have already covered it, or you'd find it in the function list. Alternatively, on the platform itself, let me get back there again. On the platform itself, you'll see there's a template section. So if I go to the template section of the platform, you'll see that we have a range of templates that have been pre-built. Again, this is industry templates. It's not necessarily templates built for you. It's industry templates that we offer. Again, I mean, through the process over the next few months, we could build more templates that are used by you guys more often, and then everybody could reuse the same template with the different stocks. So, for example, you'll see here the correlation, that we have a correlation matrix here that we've done somewhere here. And you could then look at one of these templates and pull one of these down and then play around with these templates on your own time, and adjust these particular templates. So on the platform, and then if I look at the economic templates as well, so if you go into the platform under the economy section, there's also a bunch of economic templates that sits here as well. So you'll see here, for example, I've got a global bond template or economic dashboard. Again, looking at one of these templates, I'm just going to bring this economic dashboard down, for example. Let's give it a second. So, for example, if I look at this template, this is also automated. You'll see as I'm opening it up now, it's busy calculating and updating. It's doing its thing. And you'd see here, you'd see that the function that's used for economic data is res macro data tracker. So if I click on that, it basically, again, the logic, it's referencing a security, it's referencing a day. And I mean, you can see the security is in I7, which I believe might be a hidden column. Let's unhide these. So you can see there's a lot of data that's sitting here that's building up the logic that actually feeds this nice and pretty table. So you see here that it's looking at data in specific columns here that we've built up, and that data is now feeding into the logic that builds this table here. So again, these are quite complicated dashboards, much easier. You build much easier one, but I think the logic remains the same. The logic of building these dashboards remain the same. And again, I mean, this it ends up building like this. So if you are stuck in terms of building something, let us know, and then we can assist in designing and building that, or helping you to find the right functions to build that. Again, we've covered most of the basics in terms of Excel functionality. I think the foundational work we did at the start in terms of how a function works, function list becoming your best friend at the start. And I think once you become fluent in what the function is, like for example, I know our function starts off with res, R-A-S. So if I type in equal to res, all of my functions come up as on a list. And once you become fluent with this, so for example, if I go res security peer group name, for example, there, and if I automatically link the security, once you become fluent with the name or the functions, you could very easily start just using the res functions to build up your spreadsheet. So if you know that's a res peer group name, you know that the res daily function is my daily data function. So that's my daily data function that brings in close, high, low, open, etc. You start building this much faster once the functions are known. Is like for example, because we know VLOOKUP so well, we just basically go equal to VLOOKUP. We don't go search for VLOOKUP anymore because we're fluent to the function. So I'm hoping that as you use the platform more and more, and as you use Excel more and more, these functions become second nature. Most of the users in the field will currently get to the function in that manner. But again, I think as a start, this should give you a good start. There will be another webinar coming up. I believe it's next week or the following week. What we will do in that webinar is we'll touch on any loose ends. We'll dive a little bit more into templates if that's required. But we'll be in touch with the relevant people at the university to understand which areas need additional focus, and we'll try and focus on those key points in the next session. But again, I think we've come to the end of this one. Thank you very much for joining. I hope the session was valuable, and please go ahead and play around, try and build stuff that you want. Again, just to remind you, the reach out address is support@equityrt.com, and you can then reach us, and we can then help you if you're really stuck. And what I would suggest is that my team be in touch with the university. We can, as a starting point, we could look at commonly used data sets and help you build up some of these templates based on your needs, so that you could get maybe 4 or 5 templates that you use regularly, and that could be shared amongst the students at the campus to pull data. They could just basically change the ticker codes and get the data they require. But thank you once again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Have a good evening, and goodbye.